everyone. I'm Michelle Olah. I'm the host of the Language Lounge. And today I have Bertha Delgadillo here with me. And we are going to talk about a kind of a buzzword, and sometimes we hear this word and we think it's kind of fluffy or not important or trendy or something, right? And we're going to really talk about social emotional learning in a very impactful way, in a way that I think is, hopefully going to touch on what you do in your language classrooms and why it's important. So, Berta, thank you so much for coming here today and talking with me. I really appreciate it. Why don't you just start by telling a little bit about, well, some of the hats, not all of the hats that you wear, but some of the hats you wear, where you teach and kind of what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Bertha Delgadillo, and I am a high school Spanish teacher, and I teach in Savannah, Georgia. I teach Spanish 2, Spanish 3, and AP. That's normally what my typical year is like, though I have taught middle school as well. And kudos to the middle school teachers. But my favorite place is the high school. That's where I prefer, and I just love to connect with that age group as well. I also do host PLCs for the Georgia Department of Education World Languages, and those are free to the teachers, to practicing teachers in Georgia and all over the states. And that's another one of my hats that I really enjoy doing, sharing with teachers about best practices and about what's working. And sometimes maybe we're not talking as much as about best practices, but we're talking about what's really happening in the classroom and validate.
That's great. That's so important. And there's some great stuff going on in Georgia. I have to say, I see a lot of really great things coming. I'm from Florida, so I kind of look north and think, wow, that's awesome. They've got some great things going on with those PLCs, which is fantastic. So, what we're going to talk about is social emotional learning. And I guess what I'd love to start out with is, I know this topic is very important to you, and I know, you've done some professional development on it, but I think I've heard that it's important to you on a very personal level as well. So why don't you just tell us, why do you feel so strongly about social emotional learning in the world language classroom and in general?
Yes, you had mentioned that sometimes there are certain terms that become buzzwords, and this is one of them. But I want to say that for me, so my social emotional learning journey started as a learner at a high school, at my high school classes here in the United States. I came to the United States when I was 11 years old, and I had to learn English, and because I had to adapt and go to school here. And I learned it in maybe about 2 years. And then on top of that, I had to I went from middle school to high school, did that transition. And I went through a lot, Michelle. I went through so much because I had to adapt to a new lifestyle. I was separated from my family, and I knew I was not going to see them again for a long time. And for personal reasons, decisions my mom had made when coming here to the States, it was not possible for me to go back to my country and see my family. So I was going through a lot. Wow. And then on top of that, because when I graduated, I was not an American citizen. I knew education has always been so important to me, but I knew that I was not going to be able to benefit from Pell Grant, or in Georgia we have the Hope Scholarship, and I couldn't benefit from any federal aid. So when I was a junior, that all started sinking in, and all of that, I was going through all of that. It was so much. And my teachers were the ones that helped me up. And my teachers, my English teachers, had the most impact in my life. My migrant education teachers had the most impact in my life. So I remember all of those teachers who shaped my perspective of life when it was maybe not necessarily the most positive outlook ahead. And that is social emotional learning. They helped me grow and see that I could continue to go on, and that I could continue to walk strong towards my goals, regardless of the obstacle in front of me. So they equipped me. They all had different, they did different things that impacted me as a teen growing up. So that teachers have been doing social emotional learning for the longest. or some aspect of it. That's the good news.
Absolutely. Right. You're absolutely right. Like it's not a new, it may be a new trend in a formal sort of way, but I think you're right that teachers have been providing that sort of support for a long time, So I'm so glad that you were able to experience. So that's kind of got you, thinking of it from a learner's perspective. And so tell me a little bit more about how this looks and what this means to you in your classroom.
Absolutely. Yes, we have, as world language teachers, we have so many opportunities to embed social emotional learning into our practice. It starts by not looking at it as one more thing to do. It's examining our practice and say, hey, what am I already doing that is social emotional learning, and adding to that little by little. And we don't have to stay away from the target language. And I know that something as simple as, if you do a group activity, for example, if you do collaborative activities, you can give the students the opportunity to share. You can share, okay, once you're done with the group, once you're done with the group activity, you can have the learners think about who was the person that was the best collaborator in the group, and then they can share out. They will together, let's say it's
Mm-hmm.
a group of four, they will talk about among the group who was the best collaborator and share why, what strengths. And if you want to keep it in the target language, because we might be thinking, oh, well, a level one, I can't do that. Well, we can create a slide that has those collaborative qualities, and it could have many cognates, and it could have some words maybe in English and Spanish or French or Spanish or whatever language you
Mm-hmm.
teach, and allow them to use that language to say, and we can give them the sentence. If we want to say, okay, they're going to report, we can give them the sentence stem and say, I think that such person was the greatest collaborator because he or she is blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And that is if we really don't want to depart from the target language. So that's an opportunity for social emotional learning that, again, is evaluating who is contributing the most and celebrating people and creating those relationship skills among groups. So that's a very, very important one. I know that teachers have also are very good at doing this next one that regards
Mm-hmm.
self-awareness, because self-awareness is one of the social emotional learning competencies. And I know we do
Okay.
the emotional check-ins where we have different pictures, and we ask the students when they come in, how are you, and the scale of these dragons. And then you have
Right.
different dragons with different faces and emotions. And this is a great opportunity to embed those emotion words. And again, the goal is not for the students to learn the words. That is the cherry on the top. They will learn those words over a semester because we're using them all the time to communicate. So
Mm-hmm.
that this activity has to do with self-awareness,
How
scanning
am I
my body.
feeling? Right. Yeah.
Yes, and thinking about, okay, how am I feeling right now, and sharing that. And then, we don't force I don't force my students to share
Mm-hmm.
necessarily how I handle this. And there are two ways in which you can do it. You can have the learners write their answer on a notebook if you want, where they're going to keep all their answers throughout the semester. Or my favorite way is to have them write the answer on a dry erase board. And as a matter of fact, I have so many SEL checks ready, and those are my do nows every day. Every day when we come to the class, that is what we start the class with. And we have different ways to ask the question. Sometimes I say, how are you? Sometimes I say, how are you feeling? Sometimes I say, on a scale of, and then whatever character. Sometimes I bring the
Mm-hmm.
anime because they love anime. Or sometimes I may bring, a picture of different faces of Spider-Man, things that they can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
And I also give them a scaffolds. I give them because, for example, words like because I am tired, because it's almost Friday, or because
Mm-hmm.
I did not sleep well, or because I slept great, or because it's too early. Like all those sentences are there. And then later on, they're using them, even if I don't give it to them, because they use them so many times. So doing those social emotional checks at the beginning, it sounds basic, but it's so powerful because it allows them to think about how they're feeling, to express that in a healthy way, and to feel seen and acknowledged if they choose to share it. And if they don't want to share it, I tell them that they can tell me a phrase in Spanish. um, I don't want to share at this moment, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have to respect that as well. If teachers are going to do this, here's my best advice. If you're not doing this already, asking them how they're doing at some point of the class. You do not have to do it like me as a do now. If you don't want to, you can do your normal do now, warm up, bell ringer, whatever you want to call it, and then you can jump into the SEL check if you want. But here's my biggest advice for this. Every day I share with them before I ask them to start sharing, even though this is a routine in my class. Every day I share with them my answer, because I'm asking something so personal. It may seem like
Yeah.
it's just a question, but it's something very, very personal. So I have to be vulnerable and I have to take the step first. And anything that has to do with social emotional learning in the classroom, if I have to model it and be vulnerable first as an educator, I'm going to do that. And that's going to allow the learners to be more into participating.
Yeah, absolutely. It is part of being a leader, right? And leading that kind of discussion and like you said, being vulnerable and it's hard, I think, for students to feel like it is a true safe place if the teacher doesn't ever feel like it is a safe place for them to share their self, right? And to share how they're feeling. I'm just thinking of these social emotional check-ins, and I'm like, I think every meeting I go through should start with them, because
Yes.
how we feel going into these things, anything like this, right? How we go into a space and how
Mm-hmm.
we're feeling does affect all of that, right? It does affect the space itself. And so I think that's so great. And like you said, it's not a big deal. It's a little thing to do, and it can absolutely be in the target language, but it can make a huge impact. I always think when I taught middle school Spanish one, but I always remember, like, we'd always have like "Cómo estás?" How are you? And we'd give them like "bien" and "mal," right? But then we
Mm-hmm.
never gave them any, like, if somebody said to me, "I'm bad," "estoy mal," then we never gave them any way to respond to that. We just like went on and talked about something else, right? And so, I love how you're giving them some of that language, to be able to express themselves, right? And to be able to be
Yeah,
self-aware.
and something so important, and I want to say, teachers definitely, the teachers who are listening, definitely try this, because I notice and I commend my students on this as well. At the beginning, when they come to my class, they might give me one sentence, but then later on, they're combining sentences. And the purpose of this social emotional learning check is not to teach the emotions, it's not to teach any
Mhm.
of those phrases, but it's going to happen naturally because we're using the language to communicate every day at the
Absolutely.
beginning. So I had students now that tell me some really crazy sentences, and, and they would say things like, "Oh, today I am frustrated with Spanish class because uh, the because it is very cold in here today." Like, because they are always complaining about the air conditioning and things like that. So silly stuff, but also. Something else that I want to say: beware, because this can happen. I had a student who shared the other day that she was happy because her boyfriend told her that he loved her. So she shared something extremely personal, and I
Yeah.
went, like, I drew a heart with my fingers, and I said, "Oh, clase." And my students were laughing at me, though. They were not laughing at
Mhm.
her. So they were laughing at me, but it could have been interpreted as they were laughing at my student who shared this. So I had to stop the class at that moment, and I had to say, okay, um, what are we laughing at? And then they're like, well, we're laughing at you. And I said, I hope you're laughing at me, because this is not appropriate. This is a moment for us to share how we're doing. And if somebody's bold enough to share with us how they're doing, we are going to respect that. So sometimes if you have answers, because that might be a concern for teachers, you have someone who shares and then somebody reacts to that, it is very important to stop the class and say,
Yeah.
and this I did say in the target language, like, this has got to be a safe place for us to share whatever we want to share in the target language, and we are not going to laugh about it.
hmm Oh, absolutely. There's humor is important, and it can be a great part of that check in and that sort of, like on a scale of, 1 to 10 Johnny Depps or whatever, it might be. But you're right. You do have to make sure that that humor doesn't go into a place that compromises, that safe space and community that you've built, because that can happen. That community can be, dismantled as quickly as it's built up,
Hmm.
or
Oh,
faster than it's built up, for sure, right?
and we know it takes a while to build it up, so we're not going to allow anybody
Yeah,
to come and try to do that. Yes.
that's great. And how do your students respond to these check-ins that they do? Is it something that, you're seeing that they are being vulnerable and coming to the space? And then how does that affect that learning environment, do you think?
Well, I really believe that they can see it's another opportunity for them to see their growth over time. Especially, for example, my best example is with level 2 students, because most level 3 students, they were in my class before, so they already know what my expectation is, and they know that I'm always expecting them to write more and more and more. And I love and I praise them when they are combining sentences, or maybe using. Sometimes they play it safe and they use the scaffolds I provide for them and only that. But sometimes they combine and recombine, or sometimes they're not using from there, they're using from other things we have learned. So now my students learn how to say, my back hurts, my ears hurt. So now they're using that. They were not using it before, but now they're using that. So
Yeah.
I always, praise their progress, as far as like, oh, you're using stuff that's not in the scaffolds, but it's something you learn. So praise is key. And that is going to, when we praise out loud one student on something that they did, that's some feedback we're giving them, then the other students want that praise as well. So that motivates other students to also rise to that expectation. And yeah, I noticed that my students do enjoy it. I would say maybe not 99%, but a good, like, I would say, out of a class, maybe I have one person who may say they don't want to share it out loud.
hmm
And
hmm
the tweak I made for that one student is that I'm never going to call on that student. But I do walk when I'm doing my walk. I do go to that student and I may read, and from time to time, not, I mean, I go and read it every
Yeah.
day when I walk around, but from time to time, I may make a comment about that student's statement to him or her specifically.
Yeah, privately.
Mhm.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. So, what are some other things besides the check ins, like regular check ins that you do? Do you have students reflect on
Yes.
things as well? I know that, that's one of the things. So, one of the resources I know you've mentioned in your blog post is the CASEL website, which is
Hmm.
the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And so that was one thing I know that I saw in there and that I've heard you mention before is, self-reflection, which really goes so well and just
Hmm.
hand in hand with our, what we do, as well as the community. And when you're doing those social emotional check-ins, it is community building, right? And so that goes really well with what we do as world language teachers as well. But what are the opportunities that you provide students to kind of reflect on, not just the content, but other things that are
Yes.
going on?
And as you mentioned, that was going to be my next one that I was going to share: reflection and self-reflection. And because like you say, it's so tied to what we do in world languages, and more than likely teachers are already doing some form of self-reflection. And as I mentioned, the first example I gave about, maybe in a group we have the students
Mhm.
determining who was the best collaborator, or who was the real, the like realist student in
Uh-huh.
the group, as they like to call it. And so same with self-reflection, we want to make sure that they are having the opportunity to think about, did I do my best work? That could be a question at the end of an assessment, or at the end of a project.
Mhm.
Or even if we're having, maybe if we're doing like a formative assessment. So sometimes I have them work on, I give them a paragraph, and then I want them to write the paragraph, and then maybe I'm giving them the paragraph in English and not necessarily translate. I sometimes give them a paragraph in English, and I said, I don't want you to translate it. I just want you to tell me a summary of this in the target language. not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily like word for word translation. And these are with targets that we're working with. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe, a student is frustrated and they don't want to finish it. And then at the end, I ask them a question and I said, okay, did I give this my best shot? And if the answer is no, why? You are allowed
Mm-hmm.
to maybe turn it in. Maybe it's not your best work. Why is it not your best work? Or a project? Or maybe ask them a question, what could I do better next time? And also give them an opportunity not only to talk about themselves, but what can your teacher do better next time to support you? Because that is also scanning their abilities, but also being able to self-advocate for themselves. What
Mm-hmm.
do I need from my teacher? So those questions are pretty powerful when we're talking about self-assessment, and those are great opportunities that we can embed in languages. And what is helpful is to find those questions, or maybe to have a pool of those questions that we're going to use, so that it's not always the same
Mm-hmm.
question. um,
Yeah,
and I
that's
find
awesome.
it pretty powerful as well.
That's
and,
great. I
and
love
also,
having that idea of having a question bank that you can just kind of pull out at any time. That's fantastic.
yes, and sometimes when you have a fast finisher, because we have fast finishers all the time, when given an assessment or an assignment or something, we can pull from those questions and say, hey, can you record on Flipgrid your answer to this question, or can you write it on a piece of paper, write a couple lines about, reflect on this. So it's a great way to allow a fast finisher to share what's going on with them, and as far as their performance, and what they're thinking after they've completed a specific task.
I
and
love
and that has
that.
to do with decision making. That's the SEL competency that, when we're talking about assessing and self-assessment, that's decision making. It's directly tied to that. Another one that is totally tied to decision making, I know in world languages we do a lot with uh, showing our students, and talking to our students about proficiency, and talking about levels, and
Mhm.
in novice, what are we looking like, what's the goal of the class, what do we need to get there. Those activities are tied to setting goals, goal setting, which is a very
Yeah.
important skill. And I don't know about you, Michelle, but for me, to this day, I'm still working on my goal setting.
100%.
And
Some days I'm better than others, right?
yes, and
That's so
chunking it
true.
down, and selecting what I'm going to do, and selecting what's important, and selecting what's not important in my day to day. And that is an important skill that it would be awesome if we can pass to our students some of that. Or like time management. That's another powerful question that you can give the students as a group or individually. When I was working on this project, did I use my time wisely? And the good thing is that students are usually very, very honest, for the most
Hmm.
part, in the responses. So I always appreciate uh, reading the responses.
Yeah. I think that's what I love that you're saying is that, social emotional learning encompasses a lot of just these life skills, right? And these things that we can help mold students into becoming, developmentally into these, adults that we want them to be and that they want to be, right? And things like, goal setting and time management, those all lead to a better social and emotional well-being, because if you are not, managing your time well, you're being stressed, you're staying up late, you're having all kinds of, difficulties, right? And so I love that some of these things that, you don't necessarily think of as being part of social emotional learning, really are. So what are there any others like that you can think of? So I just love those two really kind of struck me. I'm like, oh yeah, that would be part of, I'm just thinking even personally,
No,
my own social emotional health, right? How awful I feel if I'm not setting goals or meeting them and I'm not doing these things, right? So
yes,
that's
yes.
awesome.
There are many other ones that are can be easily added to word languages as well. Another one that I really like, that is an amazing skill. The other day, I was about to lose my calm with my students. Because it
No.
happens. I don't know. I'm sure it never happens to the other teachers
No.
listening, but to me.
No one listening can ever feel that, relate to that, I'm
So
sure.
I was about to lose my calm to keep it proper.
Yeah. Yeah.
and and I raised my hand to my students, and I said, okay, descanso. And they know descanso means brain break. So I do brain
Mhm.
breaks that many of them, which I learned from La Maestra Loca, but I also, because after COVID, when we came back to the school, I developed a really awful anxiety, and I had to take medication for it. And it was a whole learning journey for me. I'm doing much better now, but because of that, I
Good.
learned how to do a lot of activities to calm myself down. And I share that, and those are things that you can help students with, because many times they don't share with us the testing anxiety they have, or how
Mhm.
tense they get because they have so much going on. Some classes give them a lot of work, and they also work. Most of my students also have an after school job, and just all kinds of stressful things.
Yeah.
I know this because of what they share in the morning. So,
Right. Right.
yes. So because of that, I wasn't about to lose my calm. So I raised my hand and I said, okay, we're going to do a brain break, not for you, but for me. But this is going to help you too. So I put a video, because you can go to YouTube and you can find videos about
Mhm.
like box breathing, or taking deep
Yes. The
breaths,
jellyfish one. I love the
guided ones,
jellyfish
right?
one. Yes.
Yes. My favorite one activity, and it's actually made for little kids, and it's done by Fun for Spanish Teacher, which is Carolina. Carolina
Yeah,
is her
yeah.
first name. Yeah,
Gomez.
she has one that has 6 different exercises to calm the way you take deep breaths, and we try them, and they're I love the visuals that she has. So I play that video, and we did all 6 of them, which the video doesn't last but maybe 3 minutes or so. It's very short.
Mhm.
And um and we did those, and I told them, when can you use this? When are you really stressed and you need? I said, maybe right now you don't you don't think you can use this. Maybe some of you do. Who can use this right now? Right now in the present, maybe not today, but maybe this week, because you
Mhm.
get really stressed out. And a couple of them raised their hands, and I also asked them, well, I'm going to tell you this: when I was your age, I didn't think I needed this, but as an adult, I went through so many things not too long ago that I had to learn this to calm myself. And they
Mhm.
know. So I was like, pick your favorite one, the one that you're most comfortable with, and then you can do it next time you're having a mental breakdown or a panic attack, or you're trying to, just get yourself together. So,
Yeah.
and then we moved on. So that was an example of, like, and again, I was going to lose it, and I acknowledged it with them. Okay, we're doing this for
Mhm.
me, not for you, but we're all going to learn. And then we got to do it, and then the class was a total reset, and we moved on with class like nothing had happened, because it was nothing bad
Yeah.
that was happening. They were just a little bit chatty and getting a little bit chaotic, and I had to kind of get it together again.
Yeah, and I think, like, what would have happened if you wouldn't? You could have lost your cool, and then learning is going to shut down, right? Or it could have continued down a path that was not really productive for, learning to happen, right? And so having that clarity or wisdom in the moment to say, okay, we're going to stop here for me, or for you, or for all of us, because I think they all benefit to really, reset everybody's emotions, their brains, so that you can get back to, what you were,
and
what
and
you're
they may
doing.
they, yeah, they may not speak about it like at that moment, but it is valuable to
Mhm.
them. And maybe you're not going to reach every child with every SEL strategy in your classroom,
Right.
but it's like you're going to reach some, and you're going to reach one strategy is going to reach some students, another strategy is going to reach other students, and so everybody's going to gain something. So that's important. I know that many teachers make do turn and talk, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of teachers do um, also peer feedback. Those are part of social emotional learning, because you do have to, especially peer feedback, when we set up our students. And I know peer feedback can seem like a lot of work, and it is a little bit challenging to set it up for it to work successfully. But once you set it up once, it's magical, because it takes away
Mm-hmm.
from a lot of your grading load and your feedback load, if we teach our students how to provide peer feedback to each other. Now, how is peer feedback? And I'm not just talking about maybe sentence structure and those kind of things. that peer feedback can definitely be used for that, and I do use it for that with my upper levels. Oh, but right now, I want to focus more on the peer feedback again of like how did the student perform, what how could the student be a better team player. We talked about the best team
Mm-hmm.
player. Now, the one that wasn't such a great team player, do a self scan. How could I have been a better team player? And that's like, and how do they talk to each other and give each other feedback? We have to be careful with our words. We know our words have power. So when we're talking about giving the students and getting them to communicate and discuss peer feedback, we have to model for them what is the appropriate way to open that conversation about
Mm-hmm.
uh, anything we are giving feedback on. It has to be with a lot of respect, and that is part of social emotional learning as well. Being able to
Yeah.
communicate and selecting our words wisely, and not just blurting out whatever we think it's
Right.
first thing that comes to our mind. So we have to
Yeah.
regulate our words. And another one would be, and I know many times we know that self-management is another competency for
Mm-hmm.
social emotional learning, and we want to help our students manage their emotions. We want to help students to control their impulses, and this has a lot to do with maybe or behavior contract. If you want to establish a class created behavior contract, or and I'm going to tell you something, I'm going to be honest. I already have my rules in my head. I just kind of guide my students because my students agree. Your students are going to agree with you. Your students are going to agree that in order to learn or acquire, not only well learn and acquire, okay, because we're going to learn about things and we're going to acquire the language. So in order for that to happen, we need to have a respectful environment. What constitutes a respectful environment? So we're going to brainstorm, and then we're going to come up with what doesn't need to happen in the class. So discussing all of that, then we can open a discussion about what does it take to control our impulses. So for example, phone usage. We know that that's a
Mm.
major issue, especially among high schoolers. How do we help them self-regulate? I have one student that I've done everything I could to help one student. Everybody else is fine, but that one student called home, did everything and we still have issues self-regulating.
Yeah.
But yes, that is it. How are we going to help this person self-regulate? Because when that student goes to another job, are they going to continue that behavior pattern at their job? How's that going to affect them in the long run? And maybe having those conversations as well. So again, social emotional learning can be embedded, or we could have life talks. My son, he's in
Mm-hmm.
high school, and he tells me about this class all the time. He loves this class, and he says, "Mom, my teacher, like I like him because he's teaching us things about X, and
Mm-hmm.
he also talks to us about life." So, just like little
That's
things like
great.
that. Pretty much when everything my son has told me that his teacher has talked to him about life are pretty much social emotional learning principles. So that's the way he's handling it. And that's great because, there's not one way to do it right or wrong.
That's so true. That is so great. I just love that. So, and you've just touched on so many things that I've never thought of when I've thought of the term social emotional learning, right? You just think of the, check-ins, like the emotional check-ins or something. So I just love that how you're explaining to me how that is I've had a very narrow definition of that before, I guess. And so I
And,
didn't really realize, but now that you connect what that means, to being a healthy, emotional, mental, responsible sort of adult and person, you're like, oh yeah, of course that makes sense that's all part of it. So
yeah,
I love
and
it.
and if we think about it, I'm sure if we think about it, if we take a moment to ask every listener to step back for a second and think about the teachers that held you up during high school or during middle
Mm-hmm.
school, and I mean, maybe elementary. For me, elementary is kind of a little blur,
Blurry, yeah.
but
It's a long time ago now.
definitely high school and middle school, both have I can think think back to the teachers who did many of these things and supported me. And I remember my English teacher who always wrote feedback on my journals, my daily journals. And that's another one. Daily journaling
Mm-hmm.
is another great opportunity to get social emotional learning in there. But I remember she always left open ended questions as feedback, and
Yeah.
sometimes we'll have a conversation back and forth. And that was, I still remember this teacher to this day, and for me it was very therapeutic at the time. And one more that I would say is just think about the teachers that made an impact in your life emotionally, and you'll find some social emotional strategies into what they did when you think about it, because that's how I started connecting all the dots when I was expanding more on like social emotional learning and how can I do this in my classroom. And I know we did not talk as much about social awareness. We touch on self-awareness, we touch on self-management and
Mm-hmm.
decision making, and social awareness and relationship skills are separate things, right? But I would say for social awareness is very connected, and we have an opportunity to use this when we're talking about culture, because when we're talking about social
Yeah.
awareness, we're talking about being empathetic, appreciating diversity, respecting others, and appreciating differences. I mean, if that's not world languages in
What we do,
intercultural
right?
interculturality, that is exactly it. So the moment that we bring a topic, a theme, a product or a practice, and we bring it with the utmost respect, and we present it to our learners, and we make a bridge to connect our learners to that, that's a great opportunity for social awareness. That's a great opportunity for appreciation. That's a great opportunity to look at a maybe at a holiday or at a practice, and not use it or participate in it in a way that we're not supposed to, but approach it with the utmost respect. And that's a great opportunity for social emotional learning as well.
I love that. I think that is so fantastic. That just ties a lot of things that we already do. I think that makes teachers and educators out there listening going, oh yeah, this is not, like you said, this isn't something extra that I have to go and research. And you can pull a lot of these, a lot of these things in if you're not already doing them, right?
Hmm.
I love that. I love that. So just really briefly, because I know you've touched a little bit on, your own, maybe this isn't, maybe our own social emotional learning or our own as teachers, and kind of what we do. Like you've talked about taking your own sort of brain breaks in the middle of class. Um, how does it, how do you feel when you're in the social more and you're in the classroom? Do you feel like your mental health and your mental well-being by working with students with some of these things, is that also reflected in your own experience as a teacher? Then are you feeling more part of a community, and some of the benefits that the students are getting, are you feeling those as well?
If I'm feeling more part of a community with my students, is that what you mean by doing this?
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. And I do realize that, for example, I would not know and I would not value uh, taking the time to reset and like taking a deep breath. I Because back in the day I was always go 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 go, and with so many things going
Yeah.
on, and I did not value that. But now I bring that experience to my students and I share that, and now they see me. It's another opportunity for them to see me as a human being, instead of seeing me as their teacher. And yes, we're going to keep the same respect. I'm their instructor, and no, I'm not their friend. But I am another human being, and I have feelings, and I also have to know how to regulate them. And I also have to know how to relate with others. And I also have to know. So, the best kind of social emotional learning you can do as an educator in your class is modeling it yourself. So if you
It's just,
have a
and I think that's what I was getting at. Exactly. Like I can imagine that if I'm having my students journal and I'm having my students think about these things as an adult, I'm also now starting to think about these things for my own well-being as well. So
and I know it, the more you start doing it, the more you start doing it, the more it will sneak in. I said sneak in because sometimes I don't even plan it. It just comes to my head and it's like, oh wow, okay, this song that I'm doing, great opportunity for social emotional learning. Let's do this activity. Or this, if I'm using a movie to teach, oh wow, okay, this is a great opportunity, this is a great storyline. I can tie the perspective and this character to this theme and this theme, and we can create some social emotional learning based on that. So it sneaks in the more you do it. It's like, it's like exercise. Well, my relationship with exercise, okay, so I don't want to generalize because I know we have some fitness teachers out there, but personally I know how valuable it is to my health. It's kind of hard to show up for myself, but I know it's going to be beneficial. But once I'm there and once I'm in the zone and once I'm seeing results, it's addictive. I have to go and I have to put in the work. So same with social emotional learning. Once you, like, at the beginning, maybe you have to read a little bit about it,
Yeah.
because you want to understand what it is. You want to understand the competencies, and once you understand the competencies, like the principles under each of the competencies, then you can start brainstorming how you can add that into units. Now this is obviously going way deeper with social emotional learning, because again, if you want to just continue to do and just determine which ones you are already doing in your class, then by all means, I'm not here to tell you, oh, you need to go all the way in, but it is so rewarding to go all the way in. It is very much so very rewarding.
That's awesome. I love it. What advice do you have for teachers as they're learning more? I know you said one of the things was just to go first and be vulnerable and kind of model some of these things. Do you have any other advice for teachers as they're looking
Yes,
at implementing some of these things?
absolutely. I would advise them to look at the social emotional learning competencies that I know I keep talking about them, but
Hmm.
self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, decision making, which you and analyzing which ones are you really good at. Because I know we are stronger at some than in others, and based on that, maybe brainstorm, because the one that you're really really good at, what is something that you could transfer to your students from that, where you have strength. And once you experience that success with that, you're gonna wanna go into the other ones, and you're gonna be
I
like, oh,
love
I'm not
that.
so good at this, so let me go step in and brainstorm some more things I can do based on this. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I know there are a lot of resources out there already for social emotional learning.
Mhm.
And also, even when you don't find something in the target language, you can always, I know we don't want to recreate, I know we're tired, preaching to the choir right here. But to me, it is so worth it. Sometimes I'm just like, I don't want to do any more things, but I really like this idea. Okay, so I'm going to take 3 minutes. Um, but yes, there are a lot of ideas out there. Maybe not as many for world languages, although there are many for world languages.
Mhm.
And you can look at those ideas and you can pick a few that you like, and maybe have a student recreate it, especially if you teach high school. I mean, you can get student helper and say, hey, I really like this activity, can you create a template for it, and then I will maybe you're gonna go in there and type whatever it is you need to type to make it in your target language. And then
Yeah.
another advice I would give, if you want some quick templates for social emotional learning, Canva for educators. I know that they're really pushing the platform for educators. I've been using it for the longest, because my presentations and things like that, I make everything
Yeah.
in. But Canva for educators, if you go to Canva for educators, it's a free account. Google Canva for educators, get a free account, and then once you go in there, search social emotional learning, and you're gonna get so many templates, so many more than you're gonna know what to do with. And
That's great.
and then pick the ones that you want to start out with, and put them in the language that you want, or get some inspiration from them, and you can start bringing some social emotional learning activities to your classroom.
I love it. Well, we'll leave it right there, I think, unless you have anything else that you wanted to share. I think this was a really, really great conversation. I think teachers are really going to be both relieved that there's not this big laundry list of things that they have to do, and that they're doing a lot of those, and maybe just being more intentional with some of the things that they bring in, and notice those areas where they could bring some of more, some of those competencies in a more deliberate way. But is there anything else that you wanted to share?
Well, I shared a lot today, and I would just say that definitely dive in. If you're already, I'm telling you, you're already doing it. If you're already asking your students to make cultural connections, you have them doing turn and talk, you have them journaling, you have them proofreading their work, self-assessing, doing peer feedback. For example, I know Samara Spielberg has an amazing free gratitude not channel, gratitude resource that is
Yeah.
an amazing opportunity for social emotional learning. So definitely go to see her on Twitter. There
Yes.
and
I'll
there's
put that in the show notes as well. Yes.
and
That's
that's
awesome.
a great example. That's a great model activity that has embedded social emotional learning into something that's target language. That's in Spanish for Spanish teachers, but definitely the idea could be adapted to other languages. If you have learners connect with quotes, so if you're studying and you're talking in the target language, the subject of your lesson is maybe Selena Quintanilla or Martin Luther King or whoever it is, the subject of your lesson. Bring a quote in the target language from that person and connect your learners to that person through some of the words, that the wisdom that these people have, and have your students reflect on those words and what they mean to them. That's another powerful strategy. If you're
I love
doing
it. I feel like we could talk all day. That's so great.
yes,
Yeah, I love
and
it.
if you do special person interviews, some of the questions you can gear them to
Yeah.
social emotional learning, and because you're allowing the students to reflect, to connect depending on the questions you bring, and that's also another one. But yes, what I'm trying to say with all this is that if you're doing collaborative activities and you're doing all of the ones that I just mentioned, you are already doing a lot of social emotional learning in your class. And however, I do want to invite you to go deeper because the rewards are many.
I love that. And as you were talking, I know we were going to wrap it up, but I had one more thought. As you were talking, we may do these things in our classroom, but I think putting a name to it and telling students that now we're talking about, this, self-awareness. Now we're talking about, goal setting, or really making that connection
Mm-hmm.
to what you're doing, to that competency, even just adding that piece to it, to what you already do, to me, I think would be very powerful, to kind of make that connection.
I agree 100%, 100%. And it's not just for older students.
Yeah.
There's so many other activities for younger students. And I just remember, and again, we were wrapping it up, but I just thought of
Oh,
another
I know,
activity.
but then
And I
then
said,
something happens, and then that's okay.
and I said,
We're not on a
I'm
clock.
gonna share it. I'm gonna share it
Yes,
with the little ones. Uh, I
yes.
know there is not a channel. I would keep saying channel. It's an Instagram account. It's called.
Okay,
It says at Micole al dia Insta. So so
okay.
so that one, they have so many printables, and you can, and they could be for teachers of any languages, because they have them in Spanish, but they have some that do not have any wording on it. And basically they have a picture of something, and that something has 31 spaces, or 29 spaces, or 30 spaces, however many days in the month are on that particular month. And what the students do, they can take that home, or they can do it at the beginning of class, or at the end of class, or at any moment during class. The teacher reminds them, okay, let's color. How are we feeling today? And there's a color assigned to each feeling. So they have to
Mm,
read the feeling, and they have to get the color and color. So by the time they're finished with the picture at the end of the month, this activity starts at the beginning of the month, and you do it every day, and it takes like 5 seconds to do.
yeah.
So at the end, they turn in their picture, and it has different colors, and you can see what emotions were more prevalent in the month, and that's very
Oh,
interesting to look at.
man, I feel like I should do that. I mean, like, I think you could get a lot of insight, right?
Lots of
Both
stuff to
personal and for
cover.
the whole class. Like looking at that, I love that, and I'm sure that, you know, as a teacher, sometimes I think we zero in on like particular students being a certain way, and I think this would kind of also show us that. there's a whole range of feelings or emotions that one student has. It may just look like they are, one dimensional, but we'll leave it at that. But
Yes.
anyways, I love that. I'm glad you brought that one up. So we'll put that Insta account in the show notes as well. So I'll get that from you. And we'll
Yes.
put that in there as well. So we're going to list a bunch of things in the show notes where people can learn more. And I know you are doing conference presentations. I think were you just at, was it Flenge or in New Jersey? You were
No,
just
I was
someplace doing
I was
something.
in
Where were you?
Mississippi. I was in
Oh, you were in
Mississippi.
Mississippi. Oh, that's way
Yes.
off. Okay.
And
But I know you've been around doing different presentations on this, and I
yes,
know that you're very active on, social media, and you have a YouTube channel. We'll list that in the show notes as well, so that people can kind of follow you
I
and connect with you on social media.
if I may share one, I'm going to be
Yes.
doing a session for foreign language for New Jersey. I know they're doing like a
Okay,
workshop.
that's the one. Yes, that's the one I
I'm
was
gonna,
thinking. Yes, that's
I'm going to
coming
be
up.
doing one. It's a 2-hour workshop on social emotional learning. So it's 2 hours about social emotional
Perfect.
learning, and we're going to be looking closely at how we use so many things from world languages in our classes, such as how do we use authentic resources, because that's something I did not talk about. You can totally use authentic resources and tie it with social emotional learning as well. And
Yeah.
so that workshop is going to happen on February. So if you
Okay.
Google, foreign language educators of New Jersey,
Yep.
then you can go to their website and then it'll tell you information about that workshop.
Wonderful. So if there's anybody on that coast that can make it, that would be a
That's
great
actually
opportunity.
it's a virtual one.
Oh, it's virtual. Oh,
Yes,
so anybody can take advantage.
yes,
Oh, I didn't realize. Well, that's even better. Well, now I can sign up too. I don't have to go to New Jersey. So wonderful. Well, we'll put that down there as well. And we'll share that information in the show notes as well. So you can learn from Berta in a much deeper sort of context as well. So thank you so much. This was so much fun. And it really was helpful to me just to kind of broaden my understanding and my, perspectives on this. And thank you. It's been just a pleasure. And we'll be seeing you hopefully at Actful. I think you're going to be there, right?
yes, I will be there.
Wonderful. So
Thank
maybe
you.
some people can connect with you there as well.
Yes,
Thank you so much,
so
Berta.
much. It's been so much fun chatting with you about this. So thank you for the invitation.